Hello everybody and welcome back to the free online woodworking school where we aim to take your woodworking skills to the next level. In today's video, we're going to get sizing the drawer components. Let's get going. Alright, so firstly, there's going to be a little bit of a continuity error in this because I'm currently filming this drawer part of the series while the door is drying. But obviously, if you've been watching this series sequentially, then I would have already fitted the door by now. So sorry about that, ignore it. The drawer is obviously completely separate to this, so the fact that there's a missing door here shouldn't throw you off too much. Saying that, however, I have opted for some lovely curly walnut drawer sides, simply so that it matches the door panel. This is something that I like doing with projects where I have a strong primary colour going on or a strong primary wood going on, in this case ash, and then we've got a secondary colour, in this case walnut, that is quite prominent but not as much as that primary colour, and then we're going to have a tertiary colour of much finer, basically just areas of punctuation, I suppose, and in that case it's going to be the door handle and the drawer handle, which I'm hoping to make from a dark wood like ebony or something. In my opinion at least, as soon as you start adding more than 3 colours, especially more than 4 colours, things just get a little noisy and messy. Of course that is completely up to you, but that's just how I do things. 3 colours, primary, secondary, and then a sort of small tertiary colour just to accent things a bit. And so I've pre-thicknessed these components to just about bite within this drawer cavity with regards to the up and down distance. Same again for the drawer sides. You can see it just about fits in here. Tell you what, there we go. So it's just about going in there. And so if you're sizing that with a machine, which is what I've done today, then that's pretty easy. Just run it through, taking off, I took off about 0.5 millimeters at a time until I just got that really nice friction fit in there. And we'll obviously plane it down to fit a bit later. And so if you're doing that by machine, like I've done, happy days. You've just got to take off about 0.5 of a millimeter at a time. Make sure you've got the cabinet there to constantly reference against and just check it after each pass of it going through the thicknesser. If you're doing it by hand, however, you know, this is something that we've already gone through multiple times in this series. Get one of the edges perfectly straight, set your marking gauge to 75 in this case, scribe all the way down it, and then plane back to that line. Whether you choose to do it upright in the vise or if you choose to do it long grain on a shooting board, it's completely up to you. And of course, if you're struggling to handle this long length when you're doing it by hand, just cut it down into smaller pieces, perhaps 2 sides, cut it off there, and then the back, and do that on its own, or I don't know. It's completely up to you, but what you're aiming for at this point is that nice friction fit. And so firstly, we're going to get the drawer front fitted within the cavity. Just got to choose a face side and a face edge for this. So I might actually get the door itself and just put that below it and see what lines up. I've got some nice diagonal grain flowing to the bottom right here, so I might try and keep that orientation going. Yeah, I think we'll go for that. So face side on the front, face edge on the top of the drawer. And so now I'm going to get one end square and use that as my reference point, get that butt up in here, and then knife a line here, cut that off, square it, and then hopefully that should fit within the cavity. All right, so we've got that fitted in there, and that's a nice friction fit. Obviously don't push it all the way in because it will get stuck, and if you have accidentally got it stuck, just take the back of the cabinet off and punch it out from behind. You have got that advantage with this design. However, some cabinets that don't have removable backs are not quite as forgiving. I know this from experience. And so next we need to establish the length of the drawer sides front to back, and for this it's easiest just to get a ruler and then measure it like that. Now in this case that is 160 millimeters, but we're going to be doing a lap dovetail here, which means that side component isn't going to quite reach the front. It's probably going to be lap back about 3 or 4 millimeters. So let's say if this were a full length drawer side, that would now be about 156. However, in order to give yourself a little bit of flexibility with this, I do not recommend making your drawer sides the entire depth of the cabinet, thus relying on the back of the cabinet to act as the stop. Because if you were to get those measurements slightly wrong, your drawer might end up not going in far enough, and then you'll have to plane down the front, which will make the laps on the front of the lap dovetails very, very thin, or alternatively, it will go in too deep. Fortunately, the latter option, where it goes in too deep, is easy to stop, and is actually what we'll be planning for when we're sizing these drawer sides, because we're going to be putting a little stop here on the front that hits the back of the drawer front itself. And so in this case, we've measured it to be about 160. I usually take off about 10 to 15 millimeters from that length. Because this is a smaller drawer, I'm going to take off 10. So that gives us drawer sides that are 150 millimeters long. And so let's get that done. Face sides and face edges at regular intervals along this long length, because we're going to be cutting it into smaller chunks later. Then we'll square off one end and then get working down from there. All right, so the two sides are now plane to length, and I've been very careful to ensure that they end up at exactly the same measurement. You can't feel any discernible step between them now. And don't worry if it ends up at 149 or 151. We have got some degree of flexibility with this. Just make sure that they are the same length. So the next part we're going to be moving on to is the back of the drawer. And if you look at the drawings for this, you might notice that the back is not actually the full height of this. It's actually a little bit thinner. Don't worry about that for now. The only part we're going to be focusing on is cutting it to length, i.e. exactly the same as the front of the drawer. Okay, so all four sides of the drawer are now sized, and we need to start putting grooves in the bottom now to accept the base. Now, of course, you've got two options for this. You can do it on the router table with the slotting cutter, exactly as we did with the frame and panel door, or you can do it by hand. Now, I copped out last time and did it on the router table with the door, so I'm going to join you hand tool homies, and I'm never going to say that again. I'm going to join you guys and do it by hand this time. But just quickly before I do that, a word of warning for those of you that do this on the router table. These drawer sides are quite small, so it's perhaps advisable you do this in a long length first and then cut it to size, but just be careful when you're shooting the ends, because you're going to have that groove there that may end up getting a little bit of breakout in there because it won't be supported. You could either put a bit of plywood or MDF or something in there to support the groove while you shoot these down to their final size, or just deal with the breakout later. It's not advisable, but you can do that. Of course, if you've already cut them to length, you can get these over the router table. Just make sure that you've got protection over that cutter. Make sure you've got feather boards in place to push this into the fence, and definitely use a push stick as well, because you don't want to be having your hands near this while you've got that slotting cutter doing the work. However, whichever method you go for, whether it's hand tool or machine, make sure you've clearly laid out which part of the component the groove is going on, because you don't want to be doing the wrong face here. So we've got the face side out and up here, which means that that is the top of the drawer. So the groove is going to be on the inside face at the bottom. And I just scribble on a rough line by pencil, and then we'll do that on all of the components. Pencil line doesn't have to be accurate, it's just an indication. And in fact, I've just drawn a groove on the back component. You don't need to do it on there. It's only the sides and the front that require a groove. The back one, yeah, there won't be a groove on that at all. So let's get that laid out again. So face side out and up, out and up, and out and up. And let's check that groove. Yep, it's all on the bottom on the inside. And so this is the setup I've opted for. Just got a hold down clamp holding this in position, and then simply a stop at the end, and that prevents it from twisting at all. Now, one thing I need to do on here is scribe a line where the bottom of the groove is going to be, and then the width of the cutter will sort out how wide that groove is going to be. And so I've set the marking gauge up to 5 millimeters. So then we'll have 5 millimeters of material below the groove. On the drawings, it says 6 millimeters, just as a precautionary measure, because it's generally a little bit safer to have more material on the bottom here than less, because then the drawer bottom has more support from underneath. But we're going to go for 5 in this case. It's completely up to you. So I'm going to lightly scribe that all the way along, and then we'll set the fence up on the plow plane to line up with the edge of that groove. Okay, so the cutter's all lined up, and I've set my depth stop on the opposite side to cut about 4 or 5 millimeters deep roughly. So we'll start at the end, short shaving, gradually increase it, all the while keeping that fence locked in to the side of the material. All right, there we go. 4 drawer components, sized and grooved. So on reflection, another thing I should have highlighted was if you make that groove too close to the bottom of the drawer, you're going to struggle to get enough material on the end grain here to actually fit a dovetail into it within the lap dovetail section, that is. If you make the groove too close, you risk exposing a gap on the front of the drawer. It's very hard to explain and very hard to picture. And so when you're making this yourself, I strongly advise leaving 6mm before starting the groove. The groove can be whatever width you want, really. It depends on the size of the panel you intend to slip within it, whether you choose to have a 4 or a 5 or a 6, just change that cutter to suit. But that gap at the bottom should be no less than 5mm, but I strongly advise using 6 because it'll be a lot easier to cut the dovetails on the end at a future date, which you will see in the next video. So as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do not forget to press the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and you can move on to the next lesson by clicking that link below. I'll see you there.